I always believed that Christmas was the one time of year my family couldn't ruin, no matter how strained things were, no matter how small their comments cut. But everything changed the night I walked past a half-closed door and heard my name wrapped in laughter that wasn't kind. In a single heartbeat, the holiday I'd been clinging to as a reminder of warmth and belonging twisted into something cold, sharp, and cruel. I didn't react. I didn't confront. I didn't even breathe too loudly. I just stood there, frozen, listening as the people I trusted most planned something meant to embarrass me in front of everyone. And the worst part wasn't the plan itself. It was how easy it seemed for them, how natural the cruelty sounded coming from their voices. I remember walking away with shaky hands, feeling that familiar heaviness spread through my chest. But beneath it, something new began to form, a quiet, calculated calm I never felt before. If they wanted to turn Christmas into a joke at my expense, they had no idea what I was capable of when pushed too far. Because that night, I decided I wouldn't just defend myself. I would expose everything they'd been hiding behind their smiles and traditions. And the present I prepared for them? Well, would you still sit at a family Christmas dinner if you knew every secret in the room was about to explode? Before everything unraveled, my life was steady. Not perfect, not extraordinary, but steady in a way I had grown to appreciate. I lived alone in a small apartment decorated with pieces I'd collected over the years, simple things that made me feel grounded. I worked a job I didn't hate, surrounded by people who were polite enough to keep each day predictable. And during the holidays, that predictability usually expanded into something warm, lights strung along the balcony, the scent of cinnamon drifting through my kitchen, and the annual trip to my parents' house where, whether I admitted it or not, I still hoped to feel like I belonged. I'd always been the quiet one, the observer, as my mother liked to call me. My siblings were louder, brighter, always taking up more space, while I learned to slip into the background without making waves. Over the years, that role became a habit. I showed up to birthdays, gatherings, holidays. I brought thoughtful gifts. I listened more than I spoke. And I convinced myself that was enough, even when the little signs suggested otherwise. There were moments, short, sharp moments, when I'd catch my family exchanging looks after I spoke, or when they'd abruptly change the subject when I walked into a room. I brushed it off, the way people do when they don't want to admit something hurts. I told myself I was imagining it, that families had quirks, that mine just didn't know how to express affection properly. But deep down, there was always this subtle, persistent tension, like an undercurrent pulling at the edges of our interactions. Still, Christmas had always been the one tradition I clung to. My family, complicated as they were, came together in the glow of soft lights and shared meals. Every year, I told myself that this time would feel different, lighter, warmer, closer. I planned my gifts carefully, making sure each one had meaning. I baked the same dessert I'd made since I was a teenager, partly out of habit and partly because it made me feel useful. In the weeks leading up to this Christmas, everything seemed normal. Too normal in hindsight. My mother called me more often, which I took as an attempt to reconnect. My sister texted me recipes she wanted to try for the holiday dinner. Even my brother, who usually forgot I existed until December 24th, asked if I needed help picking out gifts. I let myself believe those small gestures meant something. I let myself feel hopeful. But beneath the surface, there were hints, barely there ripples that should have warned me. Conversations that went quiet when I entered a room. A few nervous smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. The way my mother made sure I would arrive early on Christmas Day, insisting she needed my help with something, but refusing to tell me what. I chalked it up to holiday stress. I had no idea it was something else entirely. I didn't realize how fragile my place in the family had become. I didn't know the jokes they whispered when I wasn't around, or the stories they exaggerated at my expense. I didn't know that, to them, I wasn't a daughter or sister they cherished. I was the easy target, the quiet one, the person whose reactions they thought they could control. The truth is, I spent a lot of my life hoping things would get better if I stayed patient. But patience has a strange way of turning into complacency, and complacency can make you blind. As Christmas approached, I kept telling myself this would be the year our traditions finally felt like more than routine. The year I felt seen. The year things shifted. And in a way, things did shift, just not in the way I imagined. Because while I was baking cookies and wrapping gifts with painstaking care, my family was planning something very different. Something that would shatter any illusion I still held on to. Something that would flip the script on every holiday memory I'd ever protected. I just didn't know it yet. The days leading up to Christmas were a blur of routine motions, wrapping the last of the gifts, packing my overnight bag, checking the weather, confirming travel times. Everything felt normal enough that I pushed aside the strange tension I'd sensed weeks earlier. Every family has its awkward moments, I told myself. Every holiday comes with its own chaos. I convinced myself I was overthinking, that none of those lingering doubts mattered. But the truth has a habit of showing up when you least expect it. And when it does, it rarely whispers. It crashes, loud enough to shake something loose inside you. It happened the night before Christmas Eve. I had stopped by my parents' house earlier than planned, dropping off some last-minute ingredients my mother said she needed. She wasn't home when I arrived, so I let myself in using the spare key she always insisted I keep. The house was quiet, too quiet for a home that usually sounded like an orchestra of clattering dishes, blaring televisions, and overlapping conversations. I remember setting the bags down and noticing the dining table was already partially set, which was unusual. My mother never set the table this early. She liked doing it on Christmas morning, humming to herself as she laid out the silverware. But this year, the plates were out, the napkins folded, the chairs arranged with a precision that made me pause. One chair stood out immediately, mine. It was placed slightly away from the others, not centered, not aligned. Off to the side, almost like it didn't belong. A strange feeling crept up my spine. I brushed it off and went to leave a note on the counter. That's when I heard it. Laughter from upstairs. Not warm laughter. Not the kind that fills a home. It was sharp, breathless, borderline cruel. My sister's laugh, followed by my brother's. They were home, and they hadn't called out to greet me. I was about to head upstairs when I heard my own name. Not softly, not fondly. My name, spoken in a way that made my chest tighten. I don't know why I moved so quietly. Maybe instinct. Maybe dread. I crept halfway up the stairs until their voices became clearer, spilling from the slightly open door of my sister's old bedroom. "I cannot wait to see her face," my brother said. My sister responded with a smug confidence I'd never heard before. "She has no idea. Mom says she'll play along. Dad, too." A low hum of agreement. Then my sister again, amusement dripping from every word. "After everything she's done, she deserves to be taken down a notch." Taken down a notch. I pressed my hand against the wall to steady myself. They were talking about me. There was no mistaking it. The room tightened around me, the air too thick to breathe. My mind raced. What had I done? What did they think I'd done? But before I could piece anything together, my brother added, "The best part is the timing. Right before dinner, everyone there, she won't be able to hide from it." A cold rush washed through me. They were planning something. Something humiliating. Something public. I wanted to storm in, demand answers, force them to look me in the eyes while they laid out whatever cruel stunt they thought I deserved. But something stronger held me back, a deep, growing clarity. If they were willing to do this behind my back, to plot something meant to embarrass me on a day that should have been about family, then confronting them now would only give them time to prepare excuses. Or worse, change their plans to something even more unpredictable. So I stepped quietly off the stair, heart pounding, and slipped out of the house without a sound. The cold air outside hit me like a slap, forcing me to breathe again. I got into my car, shut the door, and for a long moment, I just sat there in silence. The kind of silence that changes you. As the engine hummed beneath me, my thoughts sharpened with every passing second. I replayed everything, the strange glances, the forced smiles, the sudden interest in my arrival time. The moments I dismissed as quirks or coincidences. They weren't coincidences. They were warning signs. Signs I ignored. But I wasn't ignoring anything now. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I didn't spiral into the familiar loop of trying to understand what I had done wrong. Instead, one thought anchored itself in my mind, steady and clear. If they wanted to humiliate me, they'd chosen the wrong person to underestimate. I went home and didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the dark, staring at the faint reflection of my own outline in the window. My pulse slowed. My breathing steadied. And somewhere in the quiet, a plan began forming. Sharp, deliberate, and unshakable. Revenge wasn't something I'd ever considered before. It always felt messy, petty, beneath me. But this wasn't pettiness. This was survival. This was reclaiming something they'd tried to take from me. My dignity, my place, my voice. The more I thought about it, the more the pieces aligned. My family had secrets. Everyone does. But theirs went deeper. Buried conflicts, unspoken resentments, things they pretended didn't exist. And the more I examined those memories, the more I realized how many truths they hid beneath the surface to maintain their perfect facade. They wanted a show. They wanted to make me a spectacle. So I decided to give them one. Just not the one they expected. For the next 24 hours, I worked with a focus I didn't know I possessed. I gathered information, emails, messages, records, moments they assumed I'd forgotten. I knew where my mother kept her emergency stash of documents. I knew the lies my brother told to get financial favors. I knew the secret my sister confided to a friend years ago, the one she thought no one overheard. Piece by piece, their carefully curated image began to crack. And with every crack, my resolve solidified. Christmas morning came faster than I anticipated. I woke before my alarm, my mind clear, my decision final. I packed the gifts I intended to give them, and the present they would never forget. Driving to my parents' house, I felt strangely calm. Not numb, not angry, just prepared. Like stepping onto a stage when you know your lines by heart. When I arrived, the house was buzzing with activity. Laughter drifted from the kitchen, the kind that would have sounded warm if I didn't know what lived beneath it. My mother called out a greeting, pretending everything was normal. My sister gave me a smile that didn't reach her eyes. My brother barely looked at me. And there it was, that same chair at the dining table, slightly off to the side. Waiting for the moment they'd planned. Waiting for me to sit down and unknowingly step into their trap. But I didn't sit. Not yet. Because I hadn't come just to play along. I'd come to end the game entirely. And as I stood there, heart steady, mind sharp, I realized something. They thought they were about to break me. They had absolutely no idea I'd already decided to break them first. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the present I brought wasn't wrapped in shiny paper or tied with a bow. It was buried deep inside my bag, waiting for the perfect moment. A moment that would expose every secret they thought I'd never uncover. And as I took my place in that carefully arranged room, I felt something almost like satisfaction. They wanted a show. They wanted a spectacle. They were about to get one. But not the one they prepared for. Not even close. The moment dinner began, the air in the room shifted, subtle at first, like the slow tightening of an invisible thread. My family moved around me with a rehearsed ease, clinking dishes, exchanging glances that were too quick, too practiced. My mother hovered behind my chair, the same chair placed slightly out of line, pretending to adjust the table while my sister whispered something that made my brother smirk. They thought I didn't notice. They thought I was still the quiet one. The one who never asked questions. The one who never pushed back. But not tonight. I let them move through their script for a few minutes, letting their confidence swell. I wanted them to be comfortable. I wanted them to be certain. Because the moment they felt most in control would be the moment everything shattered. Then my mother cleared her throat, too loudly, too pointedly, and tapped her glass. "It's time," she said, almost cheerfully. My stomach tightened, but not with fear. Anticipation. My sister stood, smoothing her dress, eyes flicking briefly toward me with the kind of pity that burns more than cruelty. My brother straightened in his chair, barely containing a grin. Even my father, usually the quiet mediator, avoided meeting my eyes. Whatever they planned, it was seconds away. I leaned back, my expression calm. And then my sister began speaking. She started with small jokes, subtle at first, masked under the guise of family fun. Little digs at my personality, my habits, my life. Nothing outright vicious yet. My family laughed loudly, too loudly, and I felt the shift. Their voices rose with a kind of collective cruelty, a shared enjoyment that made my skin prickle. Then she moved to the main event, the part that was supposed to break me. She pulled out a small envelope and held it up with a flourish, as if unveiling some grand surprise. My brother practically bounced in his seat. "This," she said dramatically, "is something we all thought you should finally hear." I knew what it was before she said it. A letter I wrote years ago. Something personal, something vulnerable, something never meant to be shared. Something they'd kept, twisted, weaponized. They planned to read it aloud. At the Christmas table. In front of everyone. My mother gave me a tight, anticipatory smile. My father looked away. I inhaled once, slowly, as my sister tore open the envelope. But before she could speak a single word, I placed my hand on the table and said, steady and calm, "That's enough." They froze. Every pair of eyes snapped toward me. They weren't used to me interrupting. They weren't used to me taking up space. Before any of them could respond, I reached into my bag and pulled out the small, neatly wrapped box I had prepared. Gold paper. Red ribbon. It looked harmless, beautiful, even. I set it in the center of the table. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. "You wanted to give me something tonight," I said. "So, I thought it was only fair that I bring something for you too." Silence flooded the room. My sister lowered the letter. My mother's smile faltered. My brother scoffed. "What is this supposed to be?" I didn't answer. Not verbally. I just nodded toward the box. "Open it." My father hesitated, but curiosity won. He reached out, pulled apart the ribbon, lifted the lid, and the first thing he saw was the stack of documents. Printed emails. Screenshots. Records. One after another. Every lie they'd told. Every secret they'd kept. Everything they thought I never knew. My mother's face drained of color as she recognized the financial discrepancies she had hidden. My brother's jaw dropped when he saw the messages he'd sent behind closed doors, messages that contradicted the spotless image he paraded around. My sister's hands trembled when she saw the written confession she had deleted years ago, the one she thought no one overheard. Their eyes darted to me, accusing, panicked, stunned. What is this?" my sister whispered. "The truth," I said. "All of it." My mother tried to speak, stumbling over excuses, but her voice cracked. My father glanced through the papers, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something like shame. "This isn't fair," my brother snapped. "You shouldn't have." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. "You planned to humiliate me tonight," I said. "You planned to tear me apart because it was easy. Because I stayed quiet. Because you assumed I wouldn't fight back." Their silence was different now, heavy, suffocating. "But you forget something," I continued. "People like me, the ones you think don't notice, we see everything. We remember everything. We just don't speak until the moment it matters." I watched their expressions twist. Anger, guilt, disbelief, fear. And then I delivered the final blow. "There's a copy of everything in that box saved elsewhere," I said softly. "And whether it stays private or not depends on what you do next." My sister slammed the letter onto the table, shaking. My mother reached out, then recoiled. My brother stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. But my father, he whispered my name, barely audible, almost pleading. I stood slowly, my chair scraping softly against the floor. "You wanted a spectacle," I said. "You wanted a memorable Christmas." I leaned forward, hands on the table, meeting each of their gazes one by one. "Congratulations. You got it." The room felt frozen in time, breaths held, hearts pounding, secrets exposed and scattered like broken ornaments across the table. And without another word, I turned toward the door. Because the real ending, the true impact of what I'd done, that was still to come. When I stepped out of that house, the cold night wrapped around me like a release, sharp, bracing, almost cleansing. Behind me, the muffled sound of raised voices spilled through the walls, my family scrambling to confront the truth I had laid bare in front of them. But I didn't turn back. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one shrinking, second-guessing, or apologizing for things I didn't do. I walked to my car with steady steps, each one peeling away years of quiet endurance I'd learned to mistake for strength. The engine hummed beneath my fingertips, and I realized my hands weren't shaking. Not even a little. The fear they had counted on, expected, even never came, but something else did. A kind of clarity that doesn't come often in life. The revenge I executed wasn't explosive or chaotic or fueled by rage. It was controlled, precise. A mirror held up to my family, forcing them to face the very things they tried so hard to hide behind forced smiles and holiday traditions. I knew the impact wouldn't be immediate. Truth rarely detonates all at once. It sinks slowly, settling into cracks, growing heavier with every quiet moment that follows. By the time I got home, my phone was already buzzing. First my brother, furious. Then my sister, oscillating between anger and panic. Then my mother, leaving a voicemail where her voice wavered between guilt and self-preservation. I didn't answer any of them. I didn't owe them the comfort of my voice anymore. Over the next few days, the ripple effect began. My father reached out calmly, gently, asking to talk. Not to argue, not to justify, but to understand. Maybe he finally saw the truth behind all the years I'd slipped into the background. Maybe he realized silence isn't the same as absence. Whatever the reason, he approached me with something the others couldn't muster: sincerity. And even though forgiveness didn't arrive overnight, that simple act softened something in me I didn't think was still there. My mother, on the other hand, unraveled. She was forced to confront the financial discrepancies she thought buried. Not because I exposed them publicly, but because my father demanded answers. For once, I wasn't the problem in the family. I was the catalyst for the truth they'd all pretended not to see. My siblings didn't take it well. My brother called me vindictive, dramatic, overreacting, as if the scheme they plotted against me had been harmless fun. My sister tried a different tactic: tears, guilt, soft apologies woven between excuses. Neither approach moved me, because revenge isn't about hurting people back. It's about making sure they can't keep doing what they did. And they couldn't. Not anymore. For the first time, they felt the weight of their choices instead of handing it to me. And I felt something unexpected, a strange mix of liberation and quiet grief. Revenge had given me back my voice, my boundaries, my sense of self. But it also forced me to accept something I'd avoided my entire life. Sometimes the people you want to be your family will never be the ones who protect you. Sometimes they're the ones you need protection from. Christmas changed after that. Not for them, though I'm sure they'll never forget the year their perfect holiday shattered. But for me, the lights I hung in my apartment seemed brighter. The space felt more like mine. I breathed easier, knowing I didn't have to walk into another room holding my tongue or shrinking myself to keep the peace. Peace means nothing if it requires you to disappear. In the days that followed, I kept thinking about the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge gives you control when someone tries to take it. Justice gives you closure. What I did that night lived somewhere between the two. It wasn't about destroying them. It was about freeing myself. And sometimes freedom requires a moment of darkness before the light returns. Do I regret what I did? No. Regret comes from actions that betray who you are. But for the first time, my actions defended who I was becoming. The truth is, revenge didn't change my family, it exposed them. But it changed me. It taught me that staying silent doesn't make you kind, and allowing people to hurt you doesn't make you loyal. It taught me that you're allowed to walk away from the people who taught you to hold your breath, just to be seen. And it taught me something I wish I had learned years earlier. You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that makes their cruelty comfortable. So if you're watching this, if you've ever been the quiet one, the overlooked one, the one they thought would never fight back, tell me this. At what point does protecting your peace stop being optional and start being necessary? And if the moment hasn't come yet, what will you do when it finally does?